would bring down that double-deck freeway in Oakland and cause so much death, so much of a tragedy. And yet it happened. Now, what's going to happen when this great quake takes place 100 miles east of Los Angeles? It's going to be the greatest disaster to hit the United States since the Civil War. You think of what's happened.
Isn't there the possibility that there could be enough minor quake activity that it would relieve the tension on that part of the San Andreas without having to have the big one?
You would need 10,000 modest-sized quakes to relieve the stress that's built up along this stretch of fault where the danger is so great. So the answer is no.
All right, Dr. Heppenheimer, thank you very much, I guess, for what is a very scientific look now at the San Andreas Fault, although we can never say for sure when or if or how big an earthquake will be. The people who live just across the Pacific Ocean have had a lot of experience with earthquakes, of course, and they've offered to help in the Northern California area, the Japanese. Our chief correspondent in Tokyo is Diana Karicki, and she has a report tonight on the Japanese experience with earthquakes.
This is what it's like to be in the middle of an earthquake. They're an ever-present threat in Japanese life. But even though the Japanese are used to earthquakes, they are not blasé. They recognize an earthquake's destructive power, and they take that power seriously. The Japanese are well prepared to handle earthquakes. The thinking ahead starts with construction. Many new buildings, for example, have springs that absorb energy.
Japanese buildings are required to have, say, twice to 3 times larger resistance than buildings in Los Angeles or San Francisco area.
Ask any Japanese child what to do in an earthquake, and the answer comes back by rote. This may look like a normal Japanese office, but look closer and see the chains on the bookshelves, the desk legs wedged into sockets in the floor, the windows recessed to prevent flying glass, and the numbered roofs so buildings can be identified from overhead. Japanese stood transfixed in front of large-screen TVs today, watching their networks carry the American network's coverage of the tragedy.
One person has been rescued, but...
Many are worried about friends and relatives in the Bay Area. But once the first shock of the tragedy wore off, the coverage turned to claims of superior engineering here. A construction engineer described these reinforced beams on the freeway he designed, saying his freeway wouldn't have collapsed. An American engineer made the same point on national television by describing a suspension bridge as state-of-the-art.
They've incorporated into them all of the latest design with regard to seismic activity, and I don't believe that an earthquake of the kind that just hit San Francisco would cause any damage to these bridges here.
The Japanese take the spirit of preparedness right into their own homes, making them as earthquake-proof as possible. And Japanese television doesn't hesitate to show what can happen if you don't get with the program. Diana Karicki, NBC News, Tokyo.
And we have more news from the earthquake front tonight. 3 earthquakes have struck northern China. We are told that 14 people have been killed so far and that 6,000 homes have been...
It's nice to know he still loves the way you look. And if you wear dentures, you can count on Effordent to freshen up dentures and clean away stains so well. With Effordent, all he'll notice is you.
When you've got hemorrhoids, walking is hard. Sitting, worse. Anusol has an anesthetic for the pain and itch of hemorrhoids. Prep H doesn't. Anusol has an anesthetic to take the hurt out of hemorrhoids.
I like my bottom line, I hate wasting time. I like my MCI. I get more. I like my MCI.
It's incredible. The new Sears 3 Lux camcorder.
Happy birthday, Grandpa.
It records this beautifully in normal light, this precisely even in candlelight. Only $21 a month. Great low prices every day. Great quality. Only at Sears.
Love you.
Earthquake Aftershock will continue.
Thursday, Theo faces a problem which could affect any child.
Dyslexia, what's that?
On a very special Cosby. Then on A Different World, a co-ed dorm brings out the animal in everyone.
Lassie, go home.
Then on Cheers, what did Rebecca have done by the plastic surgeon?
Wow, they look great.
And on Dear John, will Ralph get back with his ex?
How can you say no to a face like that?
Thursday.
We take for granted that our roads are safe. Well, now, take a breath, because nearly half of our Bay State bridges are substandard, literally falling apart. And as state leaders argue about how to pay the price, the cost of repair goes up. And it could be just a matter of time before one of the bridges comes down. Bill Shields reports on What Price Safety, Tuesday at 6. An Eyewitness News special segment from WBZ TV4.
At Logan Airport tonight, New Englanders who survived San Francisco's disastrous earthquake return home. Tonight, they tell us about their experiences and talk about the devastation they left behind. Also tonight, Space Shuttle Atlantis successfully deploys a $1.4 billion space probe that now begins a 6-year journey toward Jupiter. Tonight, we'll take a look at its course and update the mission of the shuttle. I'm Jack Williams. Join Liz Walker and me tonight on Nightcast.
How come Dunkin' Donuts are so fresh all the time? Because at Dunkin' Donuts, we make donuts all the time.
The People's Court comes to New England, Thursday at 5 on TV4. Earthquake aftershock continues.
Just to repeat what we were saying just a few moments ago, 3 earthquakes now have hit in northern China. We are told that at least 14 people have been killed and 6,000 homes have been lost, but then the construction in rural China of those homes is little more than a sand base, so they come down very easily. Here, we still don't know exactly how many homes have been lost. Damage estimates, very preliminary, more than $1 billion, probably go much higher than that. Not a lot of earthquake insurance around. The high cost of all of this. Our chief financial correspondent is Mike Jensen.
To repair damage like this, insurance companies are expected to pay out more than $1 billion to the owners of destroyed or damaged homes and businesses and factories. That's the insured cost. The overall cost of this earthquake is expected to be much higher. While most businesses here, at least the large ones, carry earthquake insurance, only 1 home in 5 in California is insured for earthquake damage. The government is going to help homeowners and small businesses, but mostly with low-interest loans.
Well, San Francisco has always been a city that's been able to rebound. It certainly rebounded from the earthquake of 1906, and I think the business community will pull together in San Francisco and the surrounding communities and make a strong economic recovery, and certainly SBA will be there to help them.
Much of the earthquake damage was in San Francisco. 12 apartment buildings destroyed by fire. Another 40 buildings damaged or unusable. Store windows shattered like this one at I-Magnin. Today, businesses were closed all over the city. Many had no electricity or gas. Some were cleaning up. Others were checking for structural damage.
Flashlight and batteries?
There was a run on flashlight batteries. The Pacific Stock Exchange operated by candlelight and flashlight. Things also were bad outside of San Francisco. There was terrible damage in Santa Cruz, where a shopping mall collapsed. 2 buildings were completely destroyed, 40 damaged. There were 25 fires, an estimated $325 million in damage. Then there was the destruction of public property all over the area, buildings and roads and bridges, streets that buckled. All that will cost additional millions of dollars to rebuild and repair. As always when disaster strikes, there were profits to be made. Building materials were selling out. Contractors had all the business they could handle. Analysts said even the insurance companies would probably do well, because the damage claims would not be too high, more people probably would buy earthquake insurance, and premiums might rise.
Unfortunately, many insurance companies do try to either wiggle out of a claim or pay as very little as they can.
Some insurance company stocks traded higher on the New York Stock Exchange. But generally, this earthquake sent a sobering message to the business community and to California economists. Some experts said this kind of severe earthquake could slow down the rapid economic growth rate that Northern California has been enjoying, at least for a while. Mike Jensen, NBC News, Los Angeles.
We've been having our own power difficulties here tonight. We wanted to try to show you as best we could the doorway to this apartment house, which is right behind me, and I don't think that that'll be possible. A lot of structural damage to real estate in San Francisco and a lot of psychic damage as well. One woman saying to me tonight, I'm not sure that this is nirvana anymore. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the real estate values in this city, which has among the highest priced real estate anywhere in the country. In 1971, when I was living in Southern California and we had the big earthquake there, the psychic damage was enormous for the children of the San Fernando Valley. They were seeking special help for many months afterward. That happened again not so many years ago. We have NBC's Heidi Schulman tonight looking at what counseling kids need after an earthquake.
Today, among Whittier school children, the long-term trauma of an earthquake was clear.
The teacher said that the truck drove by to work in this construction, shook one of our buildings today, and there was a gasp throughout the classroom when the building shook.
Approximately 2 weeks ago, an air conditioner kicked on in a classroom, and every child went under the table.
They still remember too clearly what happened here 2 years ago, when the last biggest California quake hit their town, when homes and businesses collapsed, when people died. Mary Yoon hasn't recovered yet.
We lost a business, we had severe damage to our home, and a lot of psychological trauma to our younger children in particular. And the psychological trauma can be recurring. One day you're fine and you're functioning 6 months from now, and the next time you step in the shower, you do it with your clothes on.
Yoon met today with other members of the Whittier Disaster Preparedness Committee, as scheduled before San Francisco's disaster. Top priority, of course, was their children's physical safety, but they know the emotional scars.
Questions from 6 years old, would you stay with me if I got crushed under this building?
These things can kill, and they have to face that at an age, as Mrs. Yoon said, before maybe they're ready to face that.
I'm sure I'm going to have some phone calls in my desk that said, you know what? My kids are having bad nightmares again. They wanted to climb into bed with me, some of our elementary school children. So it's going to reoccur.
In fact, some of the reactions may not be unlike those that we have seen in combat veterans.
Dr. William Arroyo has treated children and adults traumatized by earthquakes.
We have seen people who have developed nightmares, people who have had problems with concentration, people who have had some sort of extraordinary reliving experiences. Unfortunately, there are a minority of people who will have symptoms for many years.
Why wouldn't you have any lights after an earthquake?
Dr. Arroyo says children often recall vivid details of an earthquake years later. Sixth graders in North Hollywood did today.
In the October 1st earthquake in 1987 was my first quake ever, and I was with my friend, and I didn't know what happened because I just looked and the ground was moving up and down, and then when it stopped, everybody started screaming and everything.
We were outside. My mom started to kind of scream, and I was trying to calm her down, and I was thinking of my dad. What if something happened to him?
Mixed with their memories and their fears is a certain fatalism.
I think that's a warning for the big one, the ones coming up.
Couldn't sleep, so I should say if the big one comes, I want to die, but with my family. See, not alone.
Dr. Arroyo says that places a greater burden on parents who may be traumatized themselves.
Youngsters frequently emulate the behavior of those adults about them. But we see in some instances that parents who seem to panic or lose control often have kids who do likewise.
Doctors who worked with victims of this quake in Whittier in 1987 are concerned that the latest victims in the Bay Area get the psychological help they will need. The trauma recurs unexpectedly, they say. The fears may last.
You know, I wasn't that scared yesterday, but today I am scared.
Heidi Schulman, NBC News, Los Angeles.
And we had hoped that we would have some good news tonight of a dramatic rescue from Interstate 880, but George Lewis has just told us that they have gone into the wreckage now with infrared cameras, and they have found no sign of life in that area where they heard sounds they thought might be someone. asking for a rescue. In fact, there is no sign of life in that particular area tonight. We'll be back with more on Earthquake, the Aftershock, right after this.
Let's go with this fabric. To my customers, every little detail means a lot. So why can't